A wounded American military officer was hiding in a mountain crevice deep inside Iran, being hunted by thousands of enemy soldiers, tribal fighters, and intelligence operatives, and the world held its breath for 2 full days, wondering whether he would be captured or come home alive. What happened next was one of the most dramatic and consequential military rescues in modern American history, and it unfolded against the backdrop of a war that is now reshaping the global economy, threatening the world's most critical oil supply route, and pushing the United States and Iran toward a moment that could determine the fate of the entire Middle East for a generation. The conflict itself began on the 28th of February, when the United States and Israel launched a coordinated series of surprise strikes on military and industrial sites across Iran, igniting a war that has now entered its 37th day. Among the early casualties of that opening salvo were Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei, and in what became one of the most controversial and horrifying moments of the conflict, more than 100 school children who were killed in a single day of bombing. The strike shattered any notion that this would be a clean or limited operation. It opened a wound that has been bleeding ever since, in blood, in oil, in dollars, and in the shredded fabric of international diplomacy. On the 3rd of April, the conflict reached a dramatic and terrifying new threshold. An American F-15E Strike Eagle, one of the most advanced fighter jets in the United States arsenal, was shot down by what Iran described as a new advanced air defense system, a system American officials had previously claimed was destroyed. The downing of that aircraft was the first time a United States plane had been lost inside Iran during this war, and it immediately shattered the narrative that American forces had unchallenged dominance of Iranian airspace. 2 crew members ejected from the stricken jet and landed in hostile territory in the rugged mountainous terrain of southwestern Iran, surrounded by enemy forces who were actively closing in. The first crew member, the pilot, was rescued by American Special Forces within hours of the shootdown. But the second, a weapons system officer believed to hold the rank of colonel, was not immediately found. What followed was a desperate race against time that would last more than 24 hours and involve hundreds of American troops, dozens of aircraft, and some of the most elite covert operators in the United States military. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps cordoned off large sections of the mountainous southwestern province where the officer was believed to have come down. Iranian authorities took the extraordinary step of issuing public plea, asking ordinary citizens to find and capture the missing American, with a regional governor reportedly offering the equivalent of $60,000 as a bounty. The scene that unfolded in those mountains was like something from a military thriller. Local Bakhtiari nomadic tribesmen, traditionally armed with rifles and deeply familiar with the terrain of the Zagros Mountains, joined the search alongside regular Iranian army units and IRGC forces, all racing to get to the wounded American before United States commandos could. The CIA launched a deception campaign inside Iran, spreading false reports that both crew members had already been found and that American forces were working on their extraction, a psychological operation designed to confuse Iranian officials and buy precious time for the actual rescue team still searching the mountains. According to reporting from intelligence community sources, the CIA also made contact with civilians willing to shelter and assist the missing officer, a process known as unconventional assisted recovery, while simultaneously using classified surveillance capabilities to narrow down his location. A senior administration official described the situation with stark clarity, saying the mission amounted to finding the ultimate needle in a haystack, except the needle was a brave American soul hiding inside a mountain crevice, invisible to everyone except for the intelligence community's specialized tools. During the operation, American attack aircraft and drones dropped bombs on approaching Iranian convoys to keep them away from the rescue zone. The fighting was real, the danger was constant, and the cost was significant. An A-10 Warthog attack aircraft was also hit near the Strait of Hormuz during the same period, and 2 C-130 transport planes became stuck at a makeshift forward operating base established by American forces at an abandoned agricultural airstrip in southern Isfahan province. Those transport planes were deliberately destroyed by American forces to prevent them from falling into Iranian hands. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed it had shot down multiple American aircraft during the rescue operation, and Iranian state media broadcast footage of wreckage. American officials acknowledged the aircraft losses, but said the planes were intentionally demolished and that no service members were killed during the operation. In the early hours of Sunday morning, President Trump broke the news in a direct message to reporters, calling the rescue an Easter miracle and praising the military for its strong, decisive actions. On social media, the president posted the words, "We got him," and wrote T, that the rescued officer had sustained injuries but would be just fine. Trump characterized the operation as proof that American military dominance over Iranian airspace remained intact, a claim that was immediately disputed by the facts on the ground, given that an advanced American fighter jet, an attack aircraft, and multiple helicopters had all been struck during the operation. Iran had also downed a separate A-10 Warthog that was providing cover for the initial search teams, undercutting the administration's insistence on unchecked air superiority. The conflicting narratives were a microcosm of the broader information war being fought alongside the military one, both sides claiming victory, both sides shaping the story for their domestic audiences, and the truth lying somewhere in the wreckage scattered across the mountains of southwestern Iran. But as dramatic as the rescue was, it did not resolve the crisis that is now threatening to tear the global economy apart. Since the 28th of February, Iran has effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean through which nearly 20% of the world's oil and a fifth of its liquefied natural gas normally flows. By Monday of this week, Brent crude oil prices had surged to nearly $110 per barrel, roughly 50% higher than before the war began on February 28th. American West Texas Intermediate crude was trading even higher, having climbed 66% over the same period. Shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz remained 95% lower than pre-war levels, a near-total maritime blockade that has sent supply chains into chaos from Asia to Europe to the Americas. The economic toll has been sweeping. The halt of tanker traffic in the Strait of Hormuz has caused a major disruption in the globe. Supply of sulfur, with Gulf countries accounting for roughly 45% of world production. Fertilizer costs are projected to rise sharply as a result, with global prices expected to average 15 to 20% higher during the first half of this year if the crisis continues. Qatar's state energy company declared force majeure on all of its export contracts after LNG tankers became unable to leave the Gulf, and restarting production is expected to take weeks even after the blockade is lifted. The Shell chief executive warned publicly that fuel shortages would ripple around the world, beginning with jet fuel, then diesel, and finally gasoline. Airlines across Asia are already adjusting routes and surcharging passengers to cover skyrocketing fuel costs. In Gulf countries that rely on the Strait for more than 80% of their food imports, retailers began airlifting basic staples by mid-March, with consumer prices spiking between 40 and 120% in some areas. Corporate executives on a recent CFO Council call expressed serious alarm, with energy market analysts telling the group that the business community had set its own internal deadline of roughly 2 weeks before the closure of the Strait of Hormuz would force companies to assume the conflict would drag on until at least the middle of the year, with all the catastrophic economic consequences that would bring. The European Central Bank's chief warned in a major interview that market expectations of a swift recovery from the Iran war were overly optimistic, and that there was no way the Gulf's lost energy supply could be restored within months. The disruption, she said, could last years. One prominent market economist warned that a bear market and even a global recession could no longer be ruled out, saying everything depends on how long the strait remains closed. And yet the deadline that investors, governments, and energy markets have been watching most closely is one that expires today. Trump had issued a warning earlier this week, posting in an expletive-laden social media message that today would be what he called Power Plant Day and Bridge Day for Iran, threatening devastating new strikes if the Strait of Hormuz was not reopened by 8 o'clock in the evening Eastern Time. Oil prices climbed further on Sunday after the threat, with Brent crude rising and Iranian officials responding that the strait would not be reopened until the country was fully compensated for the damages it had suffered in the war. This was not the first such ultimatum. Trump issued a similar 48-hour warning in late March, then extended it. He extended it again. Each time markets swung violently on the news, only to stabilize when the deadline passed without the promised escalation. Analysts describe the president's approach as headline-driven and unpredictable by design, a form of maximum pressure negotiation that forces the other side to constantly guess whether the next threat is real or another bluff. Pakistan and Egypt are among the countries serving as intermediaries in back-channel communications between American and Iranian officials, with diplomatic efforts taking place through multiple quiet channels, even as the bonds continue to fall. There were reports Monday that the United States, Iran, and a group of regional mediators were discussing the terms of a potential 45-day ceasefire that could serve as a pathway to a permanent end to the conflict. Though sources familiar with the discussion said the chances of reaching a partial deal before today's deadline were described as slim. Pope Leo XIV personally called the Israeli president to urge him to reopen all paths of dialogue and protect civilians, adding the Vatican's moral weight to the chorus of international voices calling for de-escalation. Britain convened a global video conference with world leaders to coordinate on the Hormuz crisis. The United Nations Security Council is debating a resolution. The pressure from every corner of the international community is intense, and so far it has not been enough to stop the fighting. What makes this moment so deeply consequent and so frightening is the combination of military, economic, and diplomatic pressures all reaching a boiling point simultaneously. Human rights organizations estimate that more than 3,500 people have been killed by American and Israeli bombing in Iran since the war began, with at least 1,600 of those confirmed civilians, including more than 240 children. 13 American service members have also been killed. Those numbers have generated significant international criticism of the military campaign and increased pressure on the administration to pursue a diplomatic exit. Diplomatic efforts have shown very little progress in recent days, according to sources familiar with the indirect talks. Energy analysts at major financial institutions have warned that even if the Strait of Hormuz reopens tomorrow, oil prices will remain elevated for months or years because of the broader damage done to confidence, infrastructure, and the supply chains that support global energy trade. The risk premium built into energy markets will not simply evaporate when a ceasefire is signed. The physical destruction of refineries, ports, and processing facilities across the Gulf will take years to repair. An Iranian attack on Qatar's export facilities destroyed 17% of its liquefied natural gas capacity, and engineers estimate it could take 3 to 5 years to fully restore that production to pre-war levels. The world that emerges from this war, whenever it ends, will be a more expensive, more fragile, and more dangerous place for the global economy. As of this moment, tonight's 8 o'clock deadline is hours away. The rescued American officer is recovering from his wounds. American special forces are still operating deep inside a country with which the United States is at war. Oil markets are on a knife's edge. Diplomatic back channels are buzzing with last-minute proposals. And the question that every government, every energy company, every investor, and every family filling up a gas tank is asking right now is the same question: will tonight be the night the war escalates beyond anything we have seen so far, or will someone somewhere find a way to step back from the edge? There are no clean answers tonight. Only consequences that are already unfolding in the mountains of southwestern Iran, in the tanker lanes of the Strait of Hormuz, in the price of fuel at your local station, and in the rooms where exhausted diplomats are trying to prevent the worst from becoming catastrophic. This story is moving faster than any news cycle can track. Whatever happens in the next 24 hours will shape what this conflict becomes, and the world is watching every second of it. If you found this breakdown valuable, drop a comment below with your take. Do you think a deal gets done before tonight's deadline? Or are we heading into a dangerous new phase of this war? Subscribe so you do not miss the next update. This story is not slowing down, and neither are we.